Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about how we can handle hitting things with our sword and how we can implement some sort of reaction. Now, we know that our box component on our weapon is going to trigger an overlap event, and then we do our box trace to see the exact point where we hit something, and that hit result has a hit actor contained within it, and we can always check that hit actor and do something with it. Now, perhaps the most obvious thing to do would be to take the actor that we hit and cast it to a particular class. Say we have a deer, and if the cast to the deer succeeds, we could simply have a function called killDeer. But if we swing our sword and our cast fails, that means we hit something else. So then we could cast to other types of objects, like a pot, and if the hit actor casts to a pot, we could have a function for breaking the pot. So essentially, our sword will have lots of different cases to check and lots of functions for each case. And as you can imagine, this would get very complicated in a short period of time. So while this might work, it's not necessarily the best solution. For situations like these, we often turn to a particular type of programming tool called an interface. Here's how interfaces work. You'll have a class. For example, we may make a class called hitInterface, and the class will have its own functions. But the special thing about interfaces is they're designed to declare functions, but not actually define them. So we'll have the function prototype like this in the header file, where we declare a new function, but we never actually specify in the interface class what the function does. Now, this interface can be inherited by other classes. So we may have a deer class that inherits from pawn, for example, and we can also inherit from our interface class as well. So the deer is both a pawn and a hit interface. Now, if it inherits from the hit interface, it inherits that function, and the deer can provide its own body for this function. So by overriding the getHit function, the deer can call its own functions inside, like die. Now, the reason this is so much more versatile is because our weapon doesn't need to know what it hit. All it needs to do is see if the hit actor implements this interface, and then it can call the getHit function that exists on the interface. And since our deer implements that interface and has its own unique version of the getHit function, the deer will die when we hit it. And we can do this for as many classes as we want. So we might have a pot class, which derives from actor. And it can also derive from the hit interface and override its own version of the getHit function. So when our sword swings and hits a pot and checks to see if it implements that interface, it can once again call that same function getHit, and the pot will break. So this allows us to have one interface with functions on it that any class that implements the interface can have their own unique behaviors, and our sword class doesn't need to know what it hits. It can simply call the getHit function on anything that it hits, and each class will specialize with its own behavior. So our goal is to be able to swing the sword and hit something, and then we'll check to see if that actor that we hit implements the interface that we're going to create, and if it does, we can simply call that object's getHit function. And we don't even need to know what that object is, whether it's a pawn or a deer or a pot, it doesn't matter. We're simply calling the interface function, and that actor will take care of the rest. So in order to do this, we need to create an interface. And this will be a new C++ class. So we'll go down to our C++ classes folder and go to /public, and right here we'll right-click and make a new C++ class and choose a parent class for this. And if we scroll down, all the way down to the bottom, we have Unreal Interface. And we can select that and click Next. Now, I'd like my interfaces to be in their own folder. So I'm going to add interfaces right here to the end, just after public. And we can call this new class Hit Interface. And we can click Create Class. Now, right away, we're provided with a header file and a CPP file. And of course, live coding will kick off. So I can close that window and click Reload All here in Visual Studio. And now we have our new class. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We'll go to hitinterface.h. Now, when you first take a look at your HitInterface header file, you're going to scratch your head a little and be a little bit confused because we have a class declared here called uHitInterface, derived from uInterface. But then down here we have another class declaration called iHitInterface. So why do we have two classes? Well, this is related to Unreal Engine's reflection system. We have a uInterface allowing our interface to participate in reflection. And we also have an iHitInterface. And this is the interface that we're going to use when we take advantage of multiple inheritance in our classes. And this is also the class where we declare our functions. Now, in C++, interfaces are designed to have function declarations, but we don't actually define those functions. So our hitinterface.cpp is going to be left blank. We're not going to actually define any functions here. We'll simply declare them here without any definitions. And then, once we implement this interface in some other class, then we can override those functions. So for example, we might want a function here called getHit. So we can make this, it could be a void function. We can call it getHit, but we can make this a virtual function designed to be overridden in a child class. Now, optionally, we can choose to make this a pure virtual function. A pure virtual function is a function that cannot be implemented in the class in which it was declared. To make it pure virtual, we would say equals 0. So now that we have this getHit function, we can override this in any classes that implement our hit interface. And to do that, we're going to need some classes that we can implement this interface on. And we'll do that next. I'll see you soon.